Welcome. We are so glad you could join us today for this important webinar hosted by Rails to Trails Conservancy. My name is Yvonne Mwangi, and I am the Trail Resources and Planning Manager here in Washington, D.C. And it's a pleasure to be with you and moderate today's conversation. Our topic today is leveraging statewide planning to advance trail development. And just a quick note that while trails might be included in many different kinds of plans, some of which are federally mandated, like STIPs or SCORPs, today our focus is on trails as part of active transportation or standalone trails plans. And you can read much more on this topic in our trail building toolbox at the link dropped in the chat. Today, we're honored to have a panel of experts from across the country to share their firsthand experience in shaping statewide active transportation and trail plans. First, John Devine is the Executive Director of Go Georgia, which advances safe, equitable, and sustainable transportation and recreation. He previously had a 20-year career in the public sector, focusing on complete streets and trails, comprehensive planning, and grant writing. John will talk about relationship building with Georgia Department of Transportation and how that has led to Georgia's first ever statewide active transportation planning effort. Aviva Clue is the Strategic Planning Manager for the Maryland Department of Transportation's Office of Planning. Her work focuses on comprehensive and strategic planning for the organization, including long-range planning, performance management, strategic reporting, and research related to all modes of transportation. Ms. Clue has over 10 years of experience in transportation planning in both the private and public sectors. And today she'll be focusing on Maryland's planning process for their recently updated and released Transportation Trails Strategic Plan. And Jenny Kramer is Kansas DOT's Active Transportation Manager, where she's responsible for overseeing the FHWA Transportation Alternatives Program. She also serves as the Bike and Pedestrian Coordinator for the state. Jenny also manages Kansas's Active Transportation Enhancement Program aimed at the implementation of active transportation infrastructure and programming in Kansas. Jenny will walk us through the implementation of Kansas's statewide active transportation plan. Welcome to all of you, and without further ado, I'm going to invite John to get us started with the presentations. Take it away, John.
Thanks so much, Yvonne, and thanks to Rails to Trails Conservancy for organizing what I am really sure will be an awesome panel discussion. So a little bit about what we'll talk about today. You can move on to the next slide, please. We are going to look at some overview information about Go Georgia, what we do, who we are, how we do it, and then we'll go into our brand new active transportation plan in Georgia, which is still being drafted. It's our first ever, and we're proud and excited for all of this great stuff happening. And then I'll kind of tie things up with some takeaways that hopefully you guys can use back in your home state in working on great bike ped planning for where you live. So we can go to the next slide, please. Little bit about us. We are a nonprofit. Until last year, we were known as Georgia Bikes, and we liked the name Go Georgia better than Georgia Not Just Bikes anymore. So this was a good way for us to kind of expand our reach and include everyone who bikes, walks, and rolls in Georgia. We have planners and educators on our team of 5 full-time staff, and a lot of the work that we do kind of bleeds into both of those areas. Next, please. So that work entails a few different areas, and I kind of want to mention that advocacy is almost like an umbrella that expands over everything that we do, or maybe underpins everything we do. Our safety team is there to teach people how to get around correctly, safely, whether they're in a car, on a bike, or on foot. We teach law enforcement officers how to protect all of us while we're out on the roads. And then we do, classic promotion and outreach. Our planning team is involved in multiple levels of government. We help communities from tiny cities to bigger counties with their needs. A lot of the time we try to focus on vision development and like small area plans rather than a really deep dive into a whole community so that we can, be of assistance in the best way we know how. Our grants assistance program exists in large part thanks to Rails to Trails Conservancy. Kevin and Laura have been just a great resource for us to get that kicking. And we're really proud of the work that we do to bring more funding for planning infrastructure into Georgia. And then, like I said, finally, advocacy kind of is a key component of everything that we do. Great. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's why we're here. We are currently in the middle of developing Georgia's first ever statewide active transportation plan, and we can go to the next slide. What that means for us is, we started this process as something that I just thought, I'm a planner. I spent 20 years in the public sector working with cities and counties and at the regional level. And it was very obvious to me that since Georgia did not have an active transportation plan, that we needed one to kind of set up our priorities, focus implementation efforts, and hopefully tell the story of why this stuff is important to our Georgia General Assembly as it comes time to spend the state's money. We looked at our report card from the League of American Bicyclists back in 2022, and that kind of catalyzed some work on trying to get a plan in place because we got a big fat F in evaluation and planning. That's that circled little line down there. You may not be able to read exactly what it is, but it just says F, not even an F plus. So we knew there was a need for it. We have a great relationship with our state DOT. We partner with them on, everything from technical assistance to coordination, planning, education. They support our annual summit. They do a lot of great work internally, and we kind of, help them do that in many cases. And so I was having a conversation with someone in the planning office at Georgia DOT, and I said, if you ever come across a great funding source for a active transportation plan, a bike ped plan at the state level, please let me know. He sent me an email 2 weeks later, maybe, and said, hey, let's talk. I have an idea. Go Georgia. We were Georgia Bikes at the time, applied for a $3 million transportation alternatives grant to fund phase one, the rural areas of the state. We got the grant. We have not seen one penny of that money come through our shop. It's a federal program being administered by our state DOT. So thank goodness we didn't have to admin a $3 million award. And like I said, the phase one of this project is underway right now. It's focusing on the rural areas of the state. I am pretty confident that phase two funding for our urbanized areas has already been identified and hopefully allocated for that purpose. So we're excited to, as soon as we finish rural phase one, dig into the MPO areas for urban phase two. We have a very unique role, I think, in this process in that we are a member of the project management team as the statewide nonprofit advocacy organization. We are in the room with GDOT and the consultants when decisions are made. We participate fully as just a regular old member of the team. And we're both grateful for our ability to serve in that role. And also, we're not shy about telling people that the project is going to be better because we're in that role. We're on the management team and, helping make the best decisions in the moment with the key stakeholder in the state. So I think it's a great kind of like win-win situation for us to be on the PMT for this project. Just a few words about kind of where we're going with all of this. As a planner, I am really sensitive to not developing plans for the sake of developing plans. I want this document to present a unified and consistent, but also streamlined and efficient framework for us to grow our bike ped activities in Georgia and to target our investments. And so the way that we're kind of looking at implementation working is that, yes, this is 100% a statewide plan. We have in Georgia what's called regional commissions. Some states have councils of governments. Some states call them other things. We're working closely with the regional commissions on the plan, but we're also kind of breaking it down region by region and saying, each regional commission, each region is attuned to the needs of the cities and counties in their area. And so through the regions, we work with the local governments on implementation. It's already been like fairly successful, even though the plan isn't even finished yet, because we just had a TA cycle in Georgia a couple months ago. And the consultant for this plan was able to work with cities and counties that the regional commissions helped us identify and then get them ready for putting in an application. So this process we think is working very well already, even though the plan is still technically in development. What that means to me for trails planning is not we're done. I very much see trails as a critical component of our statewide active transportation plan. But what I think we're going to see in the final document is a very high level conceptual vision for trails connectivity in Georgia and not an authoritative deep dive into a state level trails plan, partially because I still think that that work deserves its own effort. So what I would like to see is the ATP present a really, grand vision for trails connectivity in Georgia and make the case for continued trails investment. But at the same time, I want us to have more space to do a real dedicated trails plan after this project is over. Next slide, please. Here's what I think you guys should know about our process, about what we've learned so far. First and foremost, I told you about our partnership with GDOT. I think that has been critical to getting this project off the ground. That's probably an understatement. I think that it just doesn't happen without that partnership. Likewise, our partnership with the Georgia Department of Natural Resources has yielded great results for both teams. And as we work on the state level as an advocacy organization, obviously we need to have good relationships with our partners at the agencies. We haven't always, and I really put this down to some very, very, very hard work by my predecessors at what was then Georgia Bikes to establish great relationships. And you don't always find that. And I think it's important to note. We also have kind of like an informal group of advocates who are allied together in fighting for these great projects that will make the state better. And so I don't want to undersell that teamwork on the advocacy level either. For us, Transportation Alternatives was a great source to fund our first ever statewide active transportation plan. It doesn't necessarily need to be the source to fund other states' similar efforts, but it was a good one for us, and it worked great. I think it's critical to have a seat at the table as the statewide advocacy organization. Your state DOT should invest heavily in your input as a key stakeholder in this process. What better way to do that than inviting you into the fold as a leader in the process and not just a box to check? So if anyone needs information or supporting arguments to be made there, I'm happy to help. But also, I think that I can reach out to some people at my DOT and maybe get them to explain why it's been so beneficial for them to have us in the room too. Home stretch here. I think the product really does need to be simple, streamlined, focused, efficient. Anything that we can do to get people to go and open the document, find exactly what they need in 2 minutes and get out will encourage them to keep using it in the future. If the document is 500-600 pages, it's going to feel really intimidating to the practitioners, to the stakeholders, to anyone responsible for either implementing the plan or even finding out more about it in the real world. For that reason, it needs to have an implementation focus. It can't just be a vision and a set of fluffy goals. You really have to have a plan of attack in implementing a plan like this. And so I think that's really essential to stress. Finally, as far as trails go, again, the way we're looking at this is that the active transportation plan will set the stage for trails planning and investment in Georgia to the extent that I hope to go to the Georgia General Assembly in a year or two when our dedicated trails plan will hopefully have been finished and talk to them all about what great work our neighbors in other states are doing on trails planning and on trails investment with dedicated state dollars. We have that happening in North Carolina, in Florida, in Alabama, and we think that Georgia is, in just such a great position to be able to tell the stories of what's happening in those states and capitalize on that great work. So my contact is on the next slide. And like Yvonne said, we're saving questions for the end. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime. Check us out on social media and the web, and I will turn it over for now.
All right, thank you so much, John. And now we're going to hear from Aviva. So, Aviva, as soon as you're ready, feel free to take it away.
Thanks. Hi, good afternoon. Again, my name is Aviva Clue, and I am so excited to share about MDOT's new statewide transportation trails strategic plan. Next slide. Today, I'll be diving into our plan development process mostly, but I also want to highlight some useful tools that were built into the plan and a quick look into our implementation approach. Before we get started, you will be hearing the word trail and transportation trail interchangeably, and I just want to clarify that this plan and this presentation only refers to transportation trails. So a transportation trail is anything that is a paved shared use path, a paved side path, and they are part of the transportation network. I want to be very clear that this plan does not include any unpaved recreational trails like a hiking or mountain biking trail. So if I say trails, I only mean transportation trails. So let's get into the history of our new plan. Momentum and interest for our trails plan had been building since the last plan was published in 2009. That was a long time ago, but it's really set a really good framework for us. It was a visionary plan, and it really set how a statewide trail network can contribute to state goals related to transportation, economic development, public health, and sustainability. We have made some great progress on what was set in this plan, and in 2020, the Maryland Department of Transportation State Highway Administration released the context-driven guide, and this helped inform the 2024 policy for complete streets and recommendations in our long-range 2050 bicycle and pedestrian master plan. These plans and policies really helped advance and increase focus on safety and consideration for multimodal facilities. So we pulled out those key trail recommendations from these efforts, and we included different things like conducting an inventory for shared use paths, identifying and prioritizing missing links, and identifying tools and partners to complete shared use path projects, and kind of morphed it into the foundation for our final transportation trails strategic plan, which was just published this September. So building upon that, we set a new vision for the strategic plan to create a safe and accessible transportation trail network that connects Marylanders to opportunities across their communities, towns, and the state. This vision is supported by 5 main goals that all support trail development with themes of... Can you still hear me? My microphone went out. Okay, sorry about that.
You're good.
So all of these goals support themes of safety, empowerment, and most importantly, connectivity. Next slide. So MDOT could not have done this project alone. This was a really big effort, and we are so proud of the robust project team that we put together with our modal partner of the State Highway Administration, our state agency partner, the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, and of course, our consultant team who helped prepare this plan. This initiative was also unique because we were supported by the Transportation Trails Technical Advisory Committee, which is a focused subcommittee of the Maryland Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, or MBPAC. And I looked at the guest list and I see some of our TAC members on there. So thank you for participating and thank you for joining today too. But this group grew from originally 25 members to over 75 trail stakeholders and subject matter experts that covered the entire state and ranged from local stakeholders to government partners to national trail advocates. And together, we really had the expertise in everything from planning to engagement to different trail implementation best practices that really supported the success of this plan development. So our plan officially kicked off in September of 2024, and our process can be divided into 3 parts, which took a complete year, took 1 year to complete. So part 1 really focused on data and research. We analyzed our existing conditions. We developed our transportation trails database. We conducted MDOT policy conversations, and we did a lot of research on what our peers were doing, what were the best practices. Part 2 really focused on engagement. So we had a public survey, we had 2 public webinars, and we did numerous listening sessions to really help inform the content of 3 trail implementation toolkits and the plan's policy recommendations. Together, these elements really helped inform the final strategic plan and what is included on an interactive website. This website is amazing. I'm going to keep pushing it, but this really serves as a living resource for our growing trails portfolio. And we wanted to make sure that it is something that can be updated annually, that we are always evolving, as we know that this plan, as soon as it's published, we need to keep going. So we intentionally created a process where their plan was influenced by data, research, tools, and especially stakeholder involvement. We really wanted to be focused on our outcomes and driven by our vision, but we knew that even though this is a Maryland Department of Transportation product, it is really for our trail implementers. So I want to just go through a few of our key elements to really highlight the success of our plan development. So again, here's our trails database. This is our inventory of transportation trails. We collected geospatial information through our technical advisory committee on existing, planned, and potential transportation trails. And as we were developing the vision and goals and the recommendations in the plan behind the scenes, we really wanted to get the public's inputs on trails in this database, along with priorities and goals. So we use this trails database to launch the Maryland Transportation Trails Survey. This survey really helped shape our plan. Next slide, please. It helped shape our recommendations. It helped shape the transportation trail implementation toolkit areas. And the survey was so important because it was created for both trail users and non-users. Of course, we had a snowball effect, and we had 86% of our trail users, or 86% of our respondents said they were trail users. But that 13% who said that they weren't trail users, we gain such valuable information. We really wanted to look at things of trail usage, how often do you use trails? How do you get to the trails that you use? What challenges or barriers are you experiencing when using or even implementing your trails? And we used a new tool to us, Survey 123, which is an ArcGIS platform. So we had a really fun mapping exercise where we took that transportation trails database and we had respondents select their area that they're most familiar with, work or home, and we said, are you familiar with these planned trails? Are you supportive of these trails? And it was really cool to get everyone's feedback while integrating different elements of the plan, such as the database. Next slide. So as we were preparing the existing conditions analysis and we were conducting our stakeholder outreach, we determined that during each phase of the project lifecycle, there are unique barriers and opportunities for trail implementation. And Identifying these key phases to support our trail implementers was so crucial, especially on these long corridor trail projects, because we know that these long projects may follow this life cycle process several times as we build each segment, or in the life cycle of the plan, they'll go through these phases multiple times. So we determined that the three continuous phases of building support, funding, and maintenance were an area that we really wanted to dig in. We wanted to create a consolidated toolkit of resources that our trail implementers can refer to time and time again. So the three toolkits are building support for trails. We identify important planning steps, outline potential allies, identify case studies, and really to help you argue your case. What are the economic benefits of trails? What are the societal benefits of trails? And for the funding toolkit, we consolidate different tips and tricks for leveraging local, state, and federal funding. We talk about federal braiding, and we look at different technical assistance opportunities to execute trail projects. And finally, in the maintaining transportation trails toolkit, we include strategies, costs, different examples across Maryland, and of course, best practices. So again, I'm going to plug our website. It is so amazing. You can go and look at the individual toolkits. You can look at the case studies. You can change the background on the map. So you can get all of this information there. And since this is a strategic plan, we just didn't want to stop at the toolkits for trail implementation. We really wanted to build out our other resources, such as this one, which is the criteria for trail selection. We wanted to create an interactive map where you can change the criteria. You know, maybe you want to look at safety, maybe you want to look at filling gaps, but we want to help you identify, meet, and then prioritize your unique needs of your jurisdictions. We also wanted to provide some checklists for how to participate in local planning. So, have you identified if your trail is in a locally adopted plan? Or maybe you need help engaging with existing groups. We wanted to develop a checklist for that so you can help get that support and momentum for your trail. And going back to our prized trail database, an inventory of trails. In this plan, we created a new designation called the Maryland Destination Trails. These signify trails that are notable for their unique features and their significant length, as well as their connection and importance to the region and across the state. And we really thought of these as destinations in and of themselves. We've all been on a trail where you're like, wow, I'm going to this trail for maybe it's a recreation purpose, but I know that I can go shopping around there or make a vacation out of it. There is a connection and importance of these trails. So one of our first implementation action items of this plan, again, it was published in September, and we're like, okay, one of the first things we want to do is we wanted to formalize that the Transportation Trails Technical Advisory Committee as a permanent subcommittee of MBPAC. And together, since this group is now formal, together this group will help finalize the process to help us nominate and designate trails as Maryland Destination Trails. We're really excited to keep working on that criteria with the team. And of course, now that the plan is published, it does not end here. We have identified 14 projects and various policy recommendations that we'll track for implementation. Again, these are all available on the website. These are just screenshots from the website and the plan, so you can click around. What's important to you? Are you on MBPAC? Are you responsible with one of these recommendations? You can see that here. And then, of course, one more time, a plug for our website, but please visit our website. Please look at the plan. It is such a great document. And we're so excited to show it off. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. Thank you.
Thank you, Aviva, for that comprehensive look at the plan. And it is a great website. I recommend everybody go check it out. And next, we'll be hearing from Jenny Kramer. So Jenny, feel free to start when you're ready.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to talk about what's going on in Kansas specific to implementing our active transportation plan. Next slide. So just a little background, we did get about $2 million per year dedicated to active transportation in 2020, and that allowed us to develop our active transportation plan. So it's a several-year process. You can check out everything I'm about to talk about by scanning that QR code. Next slide. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of our goals and strategies that are specific to trails, since that's the topic of the call today. So mobility and then community health and vibrancy is where trails are featured the most. We also did a statewide survey that captured what was important to Kansans, and trails and separated bike lanes were considered to be the most comfortable bike facilities. And then interestingly, like getting to trails by using active transportation was also important. Next slide. All right, as part of the active transportation planning process, we had an economic impact analysis done, and that was so that we could get some dollar figures around like why active tourism and active transportation is good for the state economically. Next slide. We developed a couple of toolkits, including the active tourism toolkit that used a lot of the figures from that economic impact study to make the argument for active tourism across the state. And then we also developed an active tourism planning toolkit focused on smaller communities, acknowledging that having a plan in place is critical for getting funding, being competitive for funding, and also getting priority projects funded through, like even in like big KDOT highway projects sometimes. Next slide. All right, so moving right into implementation. Next slide. I want to start with our Active Transportation Advisory Committee. So we did have a couple of committees that helped us get through the Active Transportation Plan. A lot of the members here are shown here were on that Technical Advisory Committee or core team. So we meet quarterly, and these individuals represent agencies and organizations and different areas from around the state. Next slide. So when we published the Active Transportation Plan in 2023, we didn't want to just put out a press release like one and done, and then people would just forget about the plan. So we did a year-long rollout with that plan, starting with the press release, but then also social media. And then we started what we called the Walk, Bike, Roll virtual series, where we had webinars every month featuring topics, strategies, goals in the active transportation plan. So it was a way to like really highlight what was in the plan and to keep awareness of the plan and keep it on everyone's minds. So we had monthly webinars, and that culminated then in an in-person Walk, Bike, Roll Summit at the end of the year. So you can see there, we had 120 people register for that 2023 summit. And then we just had our second summit in 2025, the end of October, and our registration jumped to 165. Highly successful, and our Active Transportation Advisory Committee met monthly to help guide the work around there. Lots of engagement. Next slide. All right, and this is just an example of one of our webinars that was on trail maintenance, and then you can see the list of the other webinars that we had. We've had 12 sessions so far and averaged over 100 registrants per webinar. And I just want to point out that when you go to the Active Transportation Plan, all of our webinars have been recorded, and those recordings and slides are available on that website. A huge thing that we did, was revive the Safe Routes to School program. So at the 2023 summit, we kicked this off. A lot has been developed since then. So if you go to that, if you scan that QR code, you'll be able to see things like the pedestrian safety lesson, our idea book. But the big thing that we really kicked off was the Safe Routes to School planning and programming grants. So that was in the end of 2023. So we awarded grants and then got them going early 2024. And these awards included actually the development of a Safe Routes to School master plan in communities. And the great thing was we had our consultant Tool Design actually work with each of these communities to get these plans done within a the span of a school year. So since we started that, we've awarded 17 communities that included 53 schools and over 15,500 students. And that continues. We're now doing it on an annual basis. Next slide. All right, I wanted to briefly touch on the Kansas Department of Transportation Transportation Alternatives Program. So this program has been evolving in Kansas over the years, and our last call for projects was 2024. We'll have another one in 2026. So we've been just doing things to make it more accessible to communities across the state, including having PE or design as participating, getting match support when we're able to, and then also bringing in other funding like Highway Safety Improvement Program funding and Carbon Reduction Program funding. So in 2024, we awarded 33 projects totaling over 42 million, and 6 million of that went towards supporting trails. And I just want to point out that doesn't even include the Recreation Trails program that is administered through the Wildlife and Parks program. Next slide. All right, and then a huge metric of success is how walking and biking infrastructure is being integrated into other KDOT projects, large projects, and then how our funding is being integrated together. So like the different sources of funding that we have available through KDOT has expanded over the years. And then also just KDOT projects that typically would be moving forward, say without trails or sidewalks, are now including side paths and trails and, improved shoulders if it's a US bike route. An example is, in Lawrence, like that goes even beyond. They're expanding their highway, like a couple of highways, and it's part of this, what they call Lawrence Loops, a trail that goes around the whole city. And right now it's at at-grade crossing, but with the expansion, that would be even more dangerous. So we'll actually be able to build a bridge to connect that loop. And that was possible by adding our state active transportation funding. Next slide. All right, I wanted to point out the US bicycle routes. We have 4 designated routes now, and the most recent being the 50 and 55. And as part of that process, like we had a couple of communities that were opposed to having this designation through their communities, thinking maybe they didn't want to encourage cyclists on these roads they thought were maybe unsafe. But we were able to pull from the active tourism toolkit with those economic impact numbers to convince them that this would ultimately be really good for their community. And then also it gets these routes as designations on KDOT's radar. So when there's any kind of shoulder improvement, road improvements, then it's more likely to be considered for the safety of cyclists. Next slide. All right, we have been doing a lot with crossing safety. As part of the active transportation plan, we also published our KDOT crossing safety guidance. That's based on the FHWA Safe Transportation for Every Pedestrian guide. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. This table is from there and provides really good recommendations based on the road configuration, speed, the daily traffic, that kind of thing. Several of these crossings actually connect trails as well. So this has been really helpful, and especially having a KDOT published document. Next slide. All right, I mentioned the planning toolkit. As part of that, we did develop this plan and policy registry. It's through ArcGIS Story Maps. This was a way to collect all the plans that have been published so far that we're aware of. It's a quick place people can go and search their community, see if there's a plan in place, or look at neighboring communities if they're interested in getting a plan in place. Again, having a plan enables communities to be a lot more competitive for funding and more likely to get their priority projects built. Next slide. This is just an example of a project that we're very proud of. It's on the Flint Hills Trail, and it's just west of Ottawa, which is a trailhead that connects both the Prairie Spirit and the Flint Hills Trail in Kansas. This is a bridge over 2 active rail lines, and it was delayed for a while because of the complication, as you know, like working with the railroad. But we prioritized it because without it, there was about a 3-mile detour that some users would call soul crushing. So like we were able to get this award through the Transportation Alternatives Program, build this bridge. We just had the ribbon cutting this last summer. And as a result, I'm going to show you a little bit of data that we were able to collect showing the impact it's had. So next slide. So in the pink bar shows the Ottawa Trail head, and you can see before and after the bridge what an impact it had on people utilizing that Flint Hills Trail in that area. Next slide. All right, and then just wanted to point out that the Flint Hills Trail was selected as a 2025 inductee to the Rails to Trails Conservancy Hall of Fame. So something we're really proud of. Had a big ceremony in Ottawa, and again, got to ride with the Department of Transportation Secretary to go check out that new bridge too. Next slide. All right, just an example of expanded partnerships across the state. The Kansas Trails Inc. was just started as a nonprofit funded by the Sunflower Foundation, who was key in the development of our active transportation plan. We're members on that Kansas Trail, so we attend those meetings, work with the communities, and this new resource has maps, promotes awareness of trails, funding, and they help us with our trail work as well, and we help them. Next slide. So the Kansas Bike Map is another example of strong partnerships. Not only the Kansas Trails Inc. helped with updating the Rail Trails of Kansas map to make sure we were accurately representing what's currently improved and available, but also what's coming up in the next couple of years that will be built, since it's a three-year map. But also commerce and tourism were very helpful in getting these graphics highlighting the awesome destinations along all of the rail trails and along now our bicycle routes that are also highlighted. Next slide. So happy also that we have a couple of report card type grading systems in the country that can demonstrate that our hard work has been recognized. So with the Bike League, they have their bicycle friendly state report card. We moved from 30 to 21 in ranking. So it's good, like if you go up to down out of 50. And the next slide is the Safe Routes to School Partnership report card. This was huge. We were designated as one of the most improved states, moving from 62 out of 200 to 200 maybe next slide, 149 out of 200. So 1 point away from the highest designation. So happy to and proud of that progress. And that's it. There's my contact information if you have questions.
Thank you, Jenny. Grades aren't everything, but you guys are doing pretty good. Before we go into Q&A, I just want to mention quickly that this is the final webinar of the year in our programming, and we are so happy you guys have been able to be with us for all year. And we have a preview of some topics that we'll be focusing on next year. So if we can go to the next slide, we'll just show that real quick. There we go. Yeah, so even though this is closing, we have a bunch of really interesting topics. So if you've gained any benefit from this, come back next year for some new webinars. Okay, back to this one. There have been a lot of questions. I don't know how many we're going to get through, but we're going to do our best. So let me see where we're going to begin. So I'm going to start with Aviva. Could you share some of the benefits of having a dedicated trails plan as opposed to, or in addition to, having trails as part of another type of plan?
Absolutely. So I will say that, like many of us, a lot of ideas and momentum comes with legislation. And in 2024, the Maryland tried to pass a state law saying that Maryland needs to stand up an office of trails. And that didn't pass, but MDOT was really energized by the interest and the momentum. And we were trying to figure out where the trail office would go. Would it go for the Maryland Department of Transportation? Would it go with our Maryland Department of Natural Resources, who owns our state lands, our recreational trails? But because that didn't work, we were like, what can we still do? At the Maryland Department of Transportation, we are so unique because we have 6 administrations underneath of us. Like most DOTs aren't set up in that way. And we were like, okay, where can this plan go? Where could it go to help lead this effort? And so within we call it the Secretary's Office, which is our headquarters, we said we have a team here that can bring together and have a policy forward standalone plan. We had that 2050 bicycle and pedestrian master plan. We had that great complete streets policy. We had state highways context driven guide. And we said, you know what? We really want something that is specialized and separate but connects to all these plans. And of course, it needs to connect to our long range Maryland transportation plan. And so we created this standalone plan, we created this standalone toolkits, but when we were thinking about creating this specialized, we'd see sector plans all the time. We kind of thought of it as a like modal trails plan. We were like, how will it fit into the update of the 2050 or not the next, sorry, the next bicycle and pedestrian master plan? So it'll be a standalone now. The last one was 15 years ago. Maybe in 15 years it can be updated. But when we update our long range bike ped master plan, the trails plan will now be a chapter. So we really wanted to make sure that we had something as close to being codified as we could to hold us accountable and make sure we update that. And that is updated every 4 years along with our Maryland transportation plan. So we really put it on our strategic planning hats and said, okay, we're looking at the timeline of all these different plans. Let's make sure the trails plan doesn't get lost again.
That's excellent. Thank you. John, I have a question for you. Are there other states whose rural statewide active transportation plans or plans, just general plans, you referenced in the development of your process?
That is probably a better question for the consultant team, who's been in the trenches on developing the actual plan. But I do know that they have surveyed extensively the work that other states are doing. And I think that like we actually had a really robust lit review as part of the beginning of this planning process. That was, I think partially designed to make a case for the kind of work that we were doing, but also to be able to focus this planning process into a way that would help our state the most. But yeah, we can we can ask our consulting team for their thoughts on that.
For any of the other speakers, are there plans that you are looking at that inspired you in other states?
Virginia had just completed their trails plan, and I highlighted our consultant team. It was Tool Design and Cambridge Systematics, and they had just wrapped up the Virginia plan. And so we got to really take the momentum of their best practices and kind of their lessons learned, especially with their engagement. And so we were really looking to them. And in Maryland in general, we don't do things just in our state. We really look at like the regional significance. And that kind of blossomed with the destination trails because we were like, trails don't have borders. States have borders, but like trails connect when we follow our waterways, when we follow really thinking about it from a transportation network. So we really wanted to look at our surrounding peers.
Fantastic. Okay, Jenny, I have a question for you. How have you integrated the vulnerable road user safety assessment and the state highway safety plans within your own active transportation?
Right. So that we did include we had a technical advisory committee that was KDOT staff as part of active transportation planning process. And so we have several strategies that are specific to that group, including the vulnerable road user initiative priorities, and also the strategic highway safety program. And then we've begun to implement or integrate it into our transportation alternatives program as well. So like if corridors are on the specific priorities where there's like a high crash history or potential for crashes, those will be more competitive as well. So we have a tool where communities can go and look in their city or town to see if, like if they have any of those priority corridors.
Wonderful. Okay, so the next question is for anyone to answer. when exploring cross-jurisdictional trails, wayfinding can be a challenge. Do these statewide plans take into consideration or promote consistent wayfinding across that state level network? Yeah, anyone can answer.
Our plan is addressing a rewrite overhaul of our pretty legacy statewide bicycling network, which was developed as a way to circulate people throughout the state on bicycles. But I have heard probably as many people tell me that they look at the state bicycle route network as a great map of roads to avoid for riding your bike across Georgia. So this is a big part of our, kind of redo here is to make something useful out of our statewide bicycle route network. Also, I did look at our lit review for our plan, and it turns out Maryland was pretty high up on the list of states that they looked at for other plans. And then we also have Wisconsin and Washington State as the kind of two other aspirational plan concepts. So figured I'd follow up on that one. You're muted, Yvonne.
Of course. Thank you. I just wanted to see if anybody had any other thoughts before I jump to the next question. We had so many. Okay. Aviva, this is specific to you. How was public input used to develop these plans, specifically the destination trails?
Yeah, so we like really started to socialize the term Maryland Destination Trails. It's something that we created through this process. So it's not like it already had its own branding, but I didn't have enough room in this. We worked really closely with the Department of Commerce. So their
Mm,
Department of Commerce has an Office of Tourism in Maryland, and they have this incredible magazine where it's a picture of the lighthouse of a lighthouse, and it says Maryland Destination Trails, and really thinking about like a destination, like thinking of trails as a destination. And they had already started that branding from like a marketing perspective. And we were like, a part of plan implementation is marketing, getting people comfortable with whether it's a new regulation or a new tool, something about that. And then the term destination trail really stuck. And so we started to socialize it at our listening sessions and our public webinars. We didn't have it on our survey quite yet because we did the survey really early because we only had a year. So we're like, let's really front load it. Let's do these existing conditions. Pulling together that trails database it was a huge effort because so many jurisdictions don't have their trails mapped. They're like, yeah, here's this piece of paper where our trail is, where we want it to be. So we really now it's still not even set in stone. We're going to use that technical advisory committee to have the criteria. There is always a public element to that too. So we're really excited to keep that going. So if anybody's interested and wants to reach out and talk about them because they have ideas, please let me know.
that's excellent. I have a question here. I think maybe Jenny could start because you mentioned a webinar that touched on maintenance, and there's a question here about operations and maintenance. In these statewide trail planning initiatives, the state won't be the trail manager often. So who were there discussions or how did you all um, integrate or think about operations and maintenance of these trails in the plan?
Um, well, for Kansas, I mean, we have tried to get communities to think about maintenance at the beginning, like in the design part of their projects. So that is like one of our strategies. But in terms of our larger trails, like wildlife and parks is, they're usually the ones who are managing the maintenance and operations or locals.
Does anybody else want to mention how they're thinking about operations and maintenance? John, I know your project is like still developing or taking shape, but any thoughts on that?
Well, I guess luckily in a lot of ways don't work at the DOT, and so operations and maintenance can be um, maybe somebody else's concern.
I'll plug our Maintaining Transportation Trails toolkit. So it's one of our 3 toolkits. We have different tips and tricks and like really looking at different trail maintenance models, a lot of the feedback that we got, and then working towards developing trail maintenance standards. We realize we don't have that across the state. And as we're thinking of transportation trails specifically as a transportation facility, like even thinking, going back to the wayfinding question of making sure they're properly signed, maybe there's different signals, like really thinking about them, and so people utilize them as a transportation facility more so than just recreation, where maybe you have a map but really integrating it again into the transportation network, because all of these are like one connection off or directly connected to our state system. But again, the maintenance toolkit is on our website.
Awesome. That's an excellent tool. Okay, let me see how many we can fit in here. Um, let me see. How is or was, and maybe you want to expound, I think each of you has mentioned this a little bit, but how was the development and implementation of statewide active transportation plans supported by legislation and capital funding? So if there's anything you wanted to add about that piece of the story.
I mentioned in my presentation, like having that dedicated 2 million that was determined through the legislature, the bipartisan, that allowed us, like I don't know that we could have done it without getting that dedicated funding that we now have annually.
We're hoping to use our plan as a way to increase investment in exactly that. And so, our goal is to be able to show up in the offices of the Georgia General Assembly with this document and say, here's what the state wants to do. Help us fund it.
And
All
we're hoping
right.
to use this plan to help push things forward.
Well, so maybe this is going to be a general kind of like final thoughts, but recommendations. What recommendations do any of you have for a state that's creating its first ever trails plan? So what advice would you give folks in that state? Any of you can answer.
Yeah. Get together a team. I think our greatest success was having such a diverse team, but really leveraging our state agency partners was so important, because this isn't just from the community, because it wasn't just a singular DOT led effort. Like we really were showing from the beginning that this isn't just us, and that.
Anyone else? We have just a few seconds.
Yeah, for us, I mean, I would echo that strongly. If you're a state DOT, bring your advocates to the table with you. Do not discount their voices throughout the process simply to run into a wall with them after the plan is completed. Work with each other, don't fight each other. Advice for advocates would be the same thing flipped around the other way. Seek out your DOT people. I haven't really encountered very many people over the course of my 20-ish years working in this field where they've dedicated what they're doing to bike ped safety, and they're not interested in what you have to say or in other people's safety or anything like that. I think like finding the common ground is a huge step in the right direction and gets you set on the right course, to be able to partner and to be able to leverage those partnerships for the betterment of your community or your state.
Jenny, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, well, and then just keeping that energy and the awareness high, like how we rolled it out and are keeping it going, and having the advisory committee with our partnerships across the state, helping to advance these goals has been great, key.
That's excellent. And that's a great note for us to end on. Thank you to our speakers, Aviva, John, Jenny, to all the speakers that we've had in our series this year, and to all of you who've joined us for all our webinars. Like I said, let's meet in 2026 for a new set of topics. Until that time, I'm wishing you a great afternoon and happy holidays from RTC.